And I would remind everyone, members and those in the audience, to please silence your cell phones during the meeting. And Mara, if you would please call the roll.
Senator Schroeder, Senator Thomas, Senator Wilson,
Here.
Representative Bowling,
Here.
Representative Raymond, Representative Sharp,
Present.
Co-Chair Carroll,
Here.
Co-Chair Heverin.
Here.
I will remember how to pronounce that from here on out. I would again like to welcome everyone here, and just to kind of set the stage for this task force on staffing, our lead staff is Ben Payne, and committee assistant is Mariah Allen. And I'd also like to recognize my co-chair, Representative Samara Heverin. And do I have any members that would like to recognize or introduce anyone in the audience before we start? All right. Seeing none, we have a daunting task ahead of us. And over the next several months, we're going to be peeling the layers within child care, early childhood education within the Commonwealth. And reading from the resolution, this task force shall study all aspects of early childhood caregiving and educational structures and operations, including but not limited to finances, licensure and certifications, workforce, state and federal laws and regulations, capacity, quality, community education and economic factors, and parent satisfaction. Additionally, the task force shall research and review various delivery models of early childhood education. And as I said, there are a lot of layers to this, and we're going to do our best to have a systematic approach to this and really look into all the issues in depth, look at what other states are doing. We will hear from providers, several providers during this task force, hear about the struggles, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, any recommendations they have. We will address child care deserts within the Commonwealth, and we'll look at child care and economic development and the relationship between economic development and child care that was really brought to light during the pandemic. Child care assistance program, impact of costs to private pay families, Head Start, and we'll also look at the idea of universal public pre-K. I don't think there's any secret that many of us support a model where it's a more all of the above approach as we move forward with this. But I know there are those that are pushing the public universal pre-K, so I think it's only prudent that we do take a look at that. But and we'll also really look closely at the mixed delivery model and all the components of that as we move forward. We'll look at workforce issues, sustainability, and we'll also spend some time on early childhood education for special needs kids, what's going on in the state with that, and what programs are available and what we can do better in that area. With that being said, I'm going to yield to co-chair for her opening comments.
Thank you, Co-Chair Carroll. I'm so excited to be on this. I became actively engaged in this conversation last summer whenever I had a constituent come to me asking what we could do for child care. And I pulled in the Kentucky State Chamber and Metro United Way, and we started having the conversations with a small working group. Earlier last year, probably, I saw a quote from a dear friend on Facebook. Not many good things come from Facebook, but this quote really did. Tommy Durham posted a quote by Desmond Tutu, and he said, "There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in." And it's something that has really struck with me as I'm looking at policy and trying to make decisions. And so I come from child care with a workforce participation perspective. And so I started looking at why can't we get people back to work? And it's not just because of a stimulus check or unemployment. There are other things. And so I think child care is a huge barrier. And so last year, it seems like last year, a few months ago, with the help of a lot of great people, we passed House Bill 499, which was the matching program, getting the private sector involved in child care. And so I'm going to this entire task force. I'm going to be looking at it from the workforce participation and how do we continue to get the private sector engaged in this. But I'm really looking forward. Senator Carroll and I've had a lot of great conversations about this, and I think we're going to be able to address a lot of things and talk about a lot of things, but have some hard conversations. And as we know, good policy comes from hard conversations. So I'm excited to be on this task force and look forward to what we can produce come December. Thank you.
Very good. And for the folks that are here in the audience and those who may be monitoring on TV, our plan from after this meeting moving forward, we'll be moving to a larger room, and the setup is going to be a little bit different. We up here are not experts in this field. I have 12 years of running an organization. We have a child care facility, a large child care facility. I know enough to get myself in trouble sometimes, but I have learned a lot over the years. But I think it's important for us to rely on experts. So as we move forward, we'll have tables set up in the room, and we'll be contacting different entities, mainly those that were listed on the original resolution, and we will invite representatives from these various organizations to sit at the table. There will be a microphone at the table, and we desire very much for this to be a joint effort where there is participation from all the stakeholders. We will have questions from the task force seated here in front, but we will also allow questions from other entities that are represented. And I think that's the best way to approach it, to utilize the expertise from all different facets of this issue and the different approaches, the different views that each organization might have. So that's kind of the compromise with the current task force structure within the legislature. This is something we felt like would be good to allow participation from all those involved, and that's what we will do from this point forward. And I'm sure that membership that is seated in the room will evolve as time goes by, and depending on what topic we might be addressing. But we want to make sure that we do hear from providers that are there every day, who have ideas on what can make them more successful and allow them to grow, to expand, and all the other different areas that we have. With that being said, I would like to introduce Dr. Sarah Vanover to come to the table. And for us to plan where we're going, we've got to know where we are. And that's what today is about. I think all of you are familiar with Dr. Vanover. She is the expert in this field within the Commonwealth. She is now with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and Terry Brooks and that organization has been very accommodating to us. And Sarah is ours during the course of this task force, and she will be front and center during most all of it. She will be seated after this meeting, and during the other meetings will be seated up here with us, and will be very intimately involved in the process as we move forward. And the goal, as you all are aware, is to have policy recommendations, and I fully anticipate the next session we will be filing legislation that will change the face of child care and early childhood education within this Commonwealth. With that being said, Dr. Vanover, I will turn the floor over to you. And ladies, if you all could, please introduce yourselves for the record. And I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Vanover with Kentucky Youth Advocates.
I'm Dr. Sarah Vanover with Kentucky Youth Advocates.
Mahek Kalra with Kentucky Youth Advocates. And I'll kick us off here. Hello, everyone, co-chairs and also members of this committee. Thank you so much for inviting us here today. We just want to, before we dive into the deeper set of issues that we face with early childhood, just wanted to say that this system essentially creates a win for parents to work, a win for children and setting them up for success in school, but also a win for Kentucky's economy. And I'll let Sarah kind of dive into that, but also I just wanted to share who Kentucky Youth Advocates is if you don't know. So for more than 40 years, KYA has been the nonpartisan independent voice for kids. Our vision is to make Kentucky the best place to be young, and Kentucky Youth Advocates believes that all children deserve to be safe, healthy, and secure. We work with policymakers, such as yourselves, to create investments and policies that are good for kids. We also like to call ourselves the data geeks for kids. So every year we put out what we call the Kentucky Kids County Data Book that shows how kids are faring and solutions to tackle. Really as a Commonwealth. And so lastly, I will just say that we've been supportive of state and federal policies that really build up childcare, whether it's affordability, high quality, or just giving local communities the autonomy to make sure that the structure survives. And so we just want to take a second to applaud the leadership that Senator Carroll, Representative Heverin, Representative Raymond, and others within this legislative body have continued to work on. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the true expert here, Sarah Vanover.
So this is my contact information with Kentucky Youth Advocates, but I also want to tell you how I came to the field of early childhood. I've worked in early childhood education for 24 years now, and in that time period, I've worked in the private school system, I've worked for Head Start, I've worked for public school preschool, and I've worked in child care programs, both as a teacher and director. So during that expanse of time, I've gotten to see how all those programs work, and they all work pretty differently. Some of them are much more complicated to understand. I don't think anybody fully understands Head Start until they have worked in Head Start. But child care, public school, preschool, and Head Start all serve huge purposes throughout the state and are really integral parts of our system. So when you think about early childhood education in the state of Kentucky, especially education and care, we have really 5 pillars that we think about that have a huge impact on our kids. Those include hands, first steps, Head Start, public school pre-K, and child care. And I want to give you a little bit of background on those so that you understand some of the nuances as far as the differences go. HANDS is run through the Department of Public Health, and it is a home visiting program for our youngest kiddos. It starts during prenatal care, so that mothers who might need parent education on how to care for their babies once they're born can start to get that care at a young age. So families enroll, and really the HANDS worker helps to interact with the kids, but also to model to the parents how to interact with their children. And it's a starting point for learning within the home, as well as to help the baby develop. Another infant toddler program that we will have throughout the state is the First Steps Early Intervention Program. This is an amazing program. I can say that we have been a participant in this program in my home. It is special education starting off from birth to 3 years of age. If a child is showing slow development in one or more areas of development, then they would have a speech pathologist, a physical therapist, developmental interventionist, or occupational therapist that can come and work with them in their natural environment. So if the child stays at home with the parent, then the therapist will go to the home to work with the baby. If the child is enrolled in a child care program, then the therapist will go to that environment and work with them. The First Steps program is one of the few programs that provide special education services in our child care programs, because the therapists, when they visit on site at the child care program, they will teach the teachers how to work with our youngest students who have disabilities. And many of our child care providers do not have any other special ed training. And so the First Steps providers are teaching parents, they're teaching the teachers, and they're helping the babies to overcome delays in certain areas. And to start the early intervention may show progress that the child may not need special education services later in life. Again, this is run through Department of Public Health, and parents may have a copay, but if they have insurance, it'll be billed, but if not, the state supplements that and helps to care for the children. Head Start and Early Head Start are federally funded programs, and they focus on children living in poverty. So a child qualifies if they are at 100% of the federal poverty level or below. Head Start focuses on children who have turned 3 up until they start kindergarten, and Early Head Start is for children from birth to 3. This program offers amazing wraparound services, the support that these families get. is just fabulous. Children get medical screenings, they get vision and dental screenings. If they don't have a winter coat, they will make sure that they get the child a winter coat. Infants, if the family has difficulty getting diapers and formula, the program provides this to help families that are living in poverty and to make sure that these children have a good start and can continue to be successful and develop at a great pace. They also offer home visiting services, but the primary method throughout Kentucky is home visiting. Almost every county in Kentucky has Head Start from 3 to 5. It is optional for programs to get the grant for early Head Start, 0 to 3, so that might not be offered in every area. Public school pre-kindergarten. So this is offered through the public school system. It's often called state-funded preschool. And the main focus is to support 3 and 4-year-olds with disabilities and then 4-year-olds who are at 160% of the federal poverty level. So this is our largest support service in the state of Kentucky for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who have a disability. If a parent doesn't have the health insurance to be able to provide physical therapy, speech pathology, the school system, once the child has an IEP, an individual education plan, then the school can provide that. And it helps to make sure that these children can get the opportunity to be as successful in kindergarten as possible. They may need special education for an extended period of time, or they may only have delays that are temporary, and these supports can help them to overcome those delays. Most counties in Kentucky offer half-day public school preschool. So the children that do receive these services usually get 3 hours of service at a time. I know in my county, it's usually 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. or 12:30 to 2:30, and so the hours can be complicated for working families. Most children that are enrolled in this program and that have every adult in the home working often have to go to an independent child care program after public school preschool in order to get a sustained day of care. Now, the challenge can be that the public school preschool staff are trained special educators. They have support services that are amazing, but when they transition to a child care program, they may not have the trained special educators that they need to support the disability that they have. And our kiddos who do have disabilities are often suspended or expelled from independent child care programs more frequently than others not because the child care program wants to have to suspend them, but because they honestly do not have the training and services to support them the same way that the public school system does. Many children with disabilities need extra adults in the classroom or extra therapy supports, and our child care programs many times are operating on the maximum amount of children in the room per adult in order to pay their bills, or the teachers may be very overwhelmed by negative behaviors that surface from a child who has autism or a child with a speech delay who may be aggressive in order to get their point across. So we're supporting children in an amazing way for 3 hours a day. We have to figure out how to support our kiddos the rest of the day. And then child care programs. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on independent child care programs for the rest of our meeting. But we have approximately 2,000 independent child care programs in the state of Kentucky. These are small businesses that focus on human capital, helping children. The teachers are there to support the children, to care for them, to educate them, to help them learn social interactions. And they have a set minimum level of standard by the state. However, there are accrediting bodies that raise those standards that centers choose to participate in, and many small businesses, because they are competitive, want their standards to be higher than their competitors so that people will see what kind of program that they run, that they are serving these children in the best way possible. So we have the minimum set, and then programs move up from there. These can be in the provider's home. We have in-home family child care programs that are much smaller in nature. We also have large centers that are independent. And so families can look and see what type of care that they want. Do they want their child to be a part of a large classroom? Would they rather have a more family-oriented environment? And then we also have registered providers, which is kind of family, friend, and neighbor care in the state, where somebody might come to the child's own home and care for them in the child's home. So there's different combinations. These programs can be full day and part day for children up through 13. And The major funding piece for childcare in the state of Kentucky is the parents paying privately out of their own expenses. However, we do have the Child Care Assistance Program in Kentucky that supports anywhere from 13 to 15% of the children enrolled in some way, in different levels of payment throughout the state. Now, I just gave you a lot of information about our different types of early care and education. Does anybody have any questions before I move forward?
Dr. Vanover, talk a little bit more about the public pre-K and the funding related to that. And I don't know how in depth you want to or can get into this, but help me understand better how that works and the financial requirement that is with every program within the state. And is that money that is budgeted through KDE? And how is all that determined?
So the Kentucky education regulations say that if a child qualifies for public school preschool, if they meet that financial risk, or if they qualify for having an IEP, an individual education plan, at the age of 3 and 4, then the county is obligated to find them a spot. And so we've seen counties that have expanded rapidly. I know I taught in the Clark County Public School system when I taught public school preschool. And in 1 year, in 2004 and 2005, we went from like 3 public school preschool classrooms to 15. It increased dramatically, and they had to keep expanding because when children qualify, they have to provide that. And that funding is state funded. Now, we've seen in Kentucky in the past couple of years how early childhood education has received more funding for public school kindergarten. And they're at a point where they're getting full day funding. Pre-K has always gotten much less, particularly since we're looking at that half day in those 3 hours. The children that are attending, they get one meal while they're there. They get typically breakfast, or if they're in the afternoon, they would have lunch. And then they have care by a certified teacher and typically a paraeducator in the classroom. And then they share the resources with the rest of the school. So if there's an occupational therapist that visits, then it would probably be the OT that works with the school, and they would come and visit the children that have that in their individual education plan. So predominantly the cost and what the school is providing is space on the campus, the facility, and the teacher, the paraeducator, and then access to the school's main resources like special education teachers. Typically this is in the $3,000 to $4,000 range per child, but that is information that I would need to double check. I do not have an exact estimate on that, so we can definitely look that up for you. Just because it's half day compared to other children. Most schools do not have after school care on site for our pre-K children because they do not want the 3 and 4 year olds to be combined with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who are much larger, more mature children. So typically there's not those services offered, and children would leave, be picked up by a parent or transported to another facility, or go to another facility by bus, something of that nature.
So is there an ability for school districts, if they wanted to operate a full day program, would that be funded through the state?
Typically what happens is that if they want to offer a full day, which some states do, but the school district picks up that extra. It's kind of when the state only funded half-day kindergarten, the district would pick up the rest in order to fund that. For pre-K, it would be the same. And different districts have done it different ways throughout the state. When I taught in Clark County, I know that it was funded half day, but we actually charged a fee for children to stay the remainder of the day. To extend that care through the normal school day hours to 2:45 or whenever the public school day ended. But again, you get into can the school fund afford that, and how the district wants to handle it. Public school preschool programs are typically not licensed through child care, but they have the ability to do so. Some public school preschool classrooms in Kentucky also have a child care license, and when that happens, they can also tap into the child care assistance program and utilize that also for children who are in low income and can help fund that extended day. Others partner with Head Start And they typically would have one Head Start teacher and one public school preschool teacher in the classroom, and then they can utilize both public school funds and Head Start funds to extend the day as well. So there's some different braiding of funds that can occur in order for that to happen. It's very hard for public school, preschool, and child care to meet the same requirements because the public school, preschool teacher requirements are so much more complicated. But Head Start and public school, preschool blend together quite often because their teacher education requirements are more similar, and many of their practices are very similar as far as the requirements for the state and the federal level. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all. I was asking if you could briefly tell us how many kids are touched by each of those 5 big components that you've mentioned, and then how many of Kentucky's kids are in childcare versus stay at home until they go to public school.
I do not have exact numbers for all programs. Again, I can pull those for you. I can tell you that with childcare, there's a maximum capacity in the state of slots of 158,264 slots. Now, let me say that slots does not mean enrollment, because many programs say a building is licensed for 80 children. That's the physical space that we say a maximum of 80 children can be allowed here. But a lot of programs, if they move up in accreditation level, they might go from one adult being able to watch 10 2-year-olds, which is not for the faint of heart. They might change that to one adult watching 6 2-year-olds at the national accreditation level. And so then they lose part of those slots and potential income, but are running a higher quality program. The other thing that we see right now that is happening quite frequently is that although we have that maximum capacity of 158,000 plus, many centers have 1 to 2 classrooms closed because of a staffing shortage that's happening nationwide. And so a center that could have 150 students may have 2 to 3 classrooms closed, and that can vastly change the number of children that can potentially be enrolled. So that has a large impact as well. I will say that our 0 to 3 programs naturally have much smaller enrollment just because the individualized care that they offer. So when you look at like a Head Start classroom versus an early Head Start classroom, you can have a 1 to 10 adult to child ratio in a Head Start classroom, maximum of 20 children in the classroom. An early Head Start classroom for children 0 to 3 has a maximum of 2 adults watching 8 children. And so you have those low numbers with very individualized care for infants and young toddlers that are very dependent on adult assistance. So our preschool children are much more independent, and we see more of them in our classrooms, up to 20 in an accredited classroom, up to 24 in state licensed classrooms, or 28, and then a maximum of 20 in classrooms that have those lower ratios. If you will look at the State of Kentucky Child Care fact sheet that we sent out to you, you can get a little idea of some of the numbers that we're looking at. I will say that, of course, everyone lost capacity slots. Every state throughout the U.S. lost capacity slots during the pandemic. There are centers that had to close down. There are centers that didn't want to reopen for fear of spreading illness, and so we lost slots that way. There was others that were less financially stable and weren't able to reopen. Kentucky initially lost approximately 9% of its programs, which was much better than what was expected. The National Association for the Education of Young Children at the beginning of the pandemic predicted up to 40% loss of child care programs throughout the U.S. based on what providers told them financially they could endure. So Kentucky lost 9%. We are back up to about 95.7% of slots because new programs have begun to reopen with additional funds that have been offered for startups and different things of that nature. Most of the slots in the state of Kentucky are in centers. Kentucky is very heavily center-based, where some states might have closer to 50% center-based and 50% family child care homes. We're about 97% of our slots are in centers, because you think bang for your buck. I mean, you have a center where you can put 150 children at one time. That serves a lot of people, and particularly in metropolitan areas, more urban areas. families are very close together. They can utilize those centers. Whereas families in our more rural areas usually lean on family child care homes a little bit more because the families are spaced further away. It's hard for a large number of families to travel to one center. And it may just be the culture within communities. They want one person to watch a small group of children. We've also seen during the pandemic that family child care homes were much more successful for people who had medically fragile children or families that were concerned about the spread of illness because the group was smaller. That sheet also breaks down the types of child care between the different types of family child care homes, and really it's just about numbers. The largest family child care homes can keep up to 12 children, whereas the smallest have under 3, so there's some differentiation there. Our centers vary anywhere from 12 children maybe to, we have programs licensed for over 300 in the state of Kentucky. A lot of times those are after-school programs in elementary schools that keep a large amount of children for a short amount of time during the day. And you can also see on that sheet the map of Kentucky that shows the availability and access of child care throughout the state. Senator Carroll mentioned child care deserts throughout the state. Deserts would be areas where child care is not accessible for all families that are looking for care. It's important to remember that not every family in every county is looking for child care. So when we talk about one slot, 3 children for every one slot, that may be the only number of children looking for a slot in that county. We have counties that have much greater needs, and other families that might be, there may be more families where one parent is staying home to care for children, so it varies based on the county what the needs are. But you can definitely tell that we have counties that are much more in need than others. Another thing to keep in mind with deserts is that Jefferson County is not a child care desert on this map. It says that there's available child care for all the children that might need it within that area. But there are communities within Jefferson County that are very in need of child care. There may be in more suburban areas, there could be many more centers than if you went to West Louisville and were looking for child care there, and there could be a shortage within that community. I live in Fayette County, and there are parts of Fayette County that in my neighborhood, I could drive to 5 child care programs within 10 minutes. And the opposite side of Fayette County near Hamburg has almost no child care programs, even though it's an area populated with businesses. They could be successful, but it's never been an area that developed child care. So communities within a county can still be a loss, even though they aren't listed on this map of being at a loss. Yes.
Representative Bowling, you have a question, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On public preschool or pre-K,
Yes.
I guess I should say, it says students who qualify, obviously, the 160% of the federal poverty, that, that's pretty standard. But with disabilities, is that a pediatrician that, diagnoses them, or does the family have to take the steps to get their child somewhere where they're diagnosed? I know some disabilities are easier to diagnose than others, but I mean, how is that standard met?
That standard is met through the public school system's individual education plans. So the big law for Individuals with Disability Education Act. You enter the public school system to apply for access to special education, and you can do that under the age of 3 and receive what's called an individual family service plan, and that's what our children in First Steps get. Or from the ages of 3 up till 21, you would get an IEP, an individual education plan. Now, a child can be born with a disability or can be diagnosed by a pediatrician. My son has autism, so an example would be that he was diagnosed by a diagnostician with autism, but the school system doesn't qualify him for services until they go through a diagnostic process with the public school system showing that his education needs are affected by his disability. And that's really where the public school system defines that, because someone can have a disability, but it not impact their ability to learn. But if you have a disability that affects the child in the classroom, their ability to learn, then they receive that IEP and get those support services. When we're looking at children from 0 to 3, it's much more holistic. If the child has any type of disability and needs supports, they get that individual family service plan. But once we look at that 3 to 21, that's where we examine it through educational impact. And I used my son as the example, but there are children who have autism that do not qualify for special education in the public school system because the public school will say that the mildness of the disability doesn't impact their ability to learn in the classroom. But for a child whose education is impacted, then they qualify for that special education plan.
Just quickly, I guess I'm not completely understanding this. Do school districts have the ability, I guess if they wanted to become licensed, where they could serve any child within their district, regardless of disability or
Public school preschool classrooms have the ability to be licensed. The catch there that makes it kind of complicated is that public school has its set of regulations, child care has its set of regulations. A lot of the basic premises line up, but there are little differences in the system, and it's hard to be managed by more than one accrediting body at the time and make sure that you get all those things lined up. We do have classrooms in public school preschool classrooms in the state of Kentucky that are also licensed. That's not the norm, though. What we see more on blending and braiding with public school would be Head Start and public school preschool combined classrooms. And usually that you'll see that more with full day classrooms of kids. And like I said, one teacher who is employed by the public school, one teacher that's employed by Head Start, and they have kids that qualify for both. There's some great examples of this, particularly in Erlanger, Kentucky. They've got classrooms that are blended together so well with that Head Start and public school preschool model, and get funding from both sources as well as, set those higher standards.
Co-Chair Heverin?
Thank you. As I'm sitting here going through this, I'm kind of laughing. A lot of times people don't pay attention to what their moms say. I'm thankful I have. My mom is director of special education and preschool in Grayson County. So you're saying these terms, I'm like, oh, I know this. I've heard this before. So thank you. This has been a great presentation so far. I guess one of my questions, with the 5 pillars, is there a connection between, because, last week I went and visited our health department in Grayson County, and they were telling me about the HANDS program, which I'd already heard about it because they do such a great job. They have community baby showers. But I think that they're also struggling with the idea that I think previously public health has been looked at for only people that are at poverty thresholds, whereas in reality, like the HANDS program is for anybody. There is no poverty threshold. And so trying to overcome that has been a real issue, I think, for many health departments across the Commonwealth. But, and it kind of goes off Representative Bowling questions. Like once you're in the HANDS program and maybe that they see that there is an issue with the child, possible, different abilities, or that they could have trouble learning in an educational environment. Is there a connection between the HANDS program and First Steps? Do the HANDS program have these resources that they can provide to the families that say, hey, you might need to look into First Steps? Or, is there, I guess, the number one issue I see across a lot of government and even just people in general as we're looking at our communities is the lack of communication between the groups. And so could you tell me just a little bit, long story short, could you tell me a little bit about just the communication between the 5 pillars?
Okay. So we're run by a couple different organizations. Department of Public Health supervises HANDS and First Steps, so they do a really good job of overlapping there. And then we've got federal funding, state funding, and private funding that supervise the programs for 3 to 5 year olds. However, a lot of the providers in this field know about these resources. Like I said earlier, the First Steps workers that go into the child care programs, they're really the only source of special education training that a lot of the child care programs get. And so many of them want to see those First Steps workers come in, and they'll make referrals. First Steps is awesome because you don't just have to be a doctor to refer a child. Parents can refer their own child to First Steps. A child care provider can refer them. And so those evaluations, a child care provider can approach a parent and say, I've noticed this and this. Maybe you should think about a referral. or the pediatrician. I've noticed this and this during checkups. It depends on the resources throughout the county and what they have available. But for the most part, a lot of our providers know about these different services. We have technical assistants out in the field for child care providers through Child Care Aware at UK, and they refer child care programs to a lot of these different resources. Of course, we have new people coming into the field all the time in the field of early education. Being one of the lowest paid fields, there's a high turnover rate. And so when we get brand new employees in the field on such a quick basis, it really is put upon our veteran staff, our more experienced staff, to help teach them about these resources. And that doesn't always happen when staff turnover happens very quickly.
Sarah, Ben brought up a good comment. With a lot of these school programs, families that are needing this type of support care, they're going to have to be proactive normally to find it. Doesn't seem like we really do a good job of promoting those programs, and it's like there's a disconnect maybe when a child is diagnosed to the next step in what the schools have to offer. Can you comment on that?
Different types of program have different types of child find. So Head Start has family service workers that literally hit the pavements in their neighborhoods and hunt down families, go door to door and tell them, this is available, do you want it? We can give you this for free. And their programs, they do such a great job of finding families in the area. Many of the public school systems also have Child Find. They have Child Find. They expand it based on the school area. But I know in my school district there is a community liaison just for preschool who goes to every fair and every community activity and sets up booths and passes out information and says you could qualify for public school preschool. And we see counties that do a fabulous job of that. A lot of it depends on staffing, though. If you have high staff turnover, you might not always have you're filling those teacher positions first because that's the highest priority. And so if you lose your community liaison, there may be a gap in who's able to spread that information. With Department of Public Health Services, those flyers, that information is in all the DCBS offices. They pass it out to pediatrician offices. They try and get that information out so that families would be aware. Activities, like Representative Heverin said, with community baby showers, man, those things are plastered with information on, these are the resources in your area, take advantage. But again, some of that is whether the families are looking for services. Another aspect is that it's very scary for young teachers to approach a family and say, you may need this resource. And so that can be an area where guidance is needed again from our more veteran staff when those referrals come in. When I was a young teacher, I always liked to blame it on the pediatricians and be like, you may want to ask your doctor about this. Go to the doctor, let them tell you. But we do rely on people in the community to help share the resources from all the different systems. And it depends how the program is set up on who reaches out to the community and does that.
Okay, we can move forward.
Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into child care. Let's see here. Oh, that wasn't the goal. Okay. So with Kentucky's child care programs, there's a few different areas. I talked a little bit about enrollment and capacity. I also want to talk about the different types of child care programs. I'm going to go forward and then come back here. But child care programs can be located in lots of different places. And this is important to remember, too, when you're thinking about how to expand child care in your community. Where could it be added? Who might be willing to host it? Homes of child care providers is one area, and this is really a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. If there needs to be child care in your area, there can be family child care homes that start up. And we had great legislation the year before last that Senator Carroll helped with to help asking people to look at their zoning laws and say, are your zoning laws in your area preventing family child care homes? Because in some counties they were. It was saying that you can't have a business in the middle of a neighborhood area, and that was preventing a business that is supposed to be in a home, to look like a home and have that home feel. That's not a storefront. We want those there because families often feel much safer leaving their babies in family child care homes. But other places in Kentucky, of course, knowing the climate of Kentucky, churches are a huge place that we have child care programs because we have a church every block, and they're empty Monday through Friday. And many churches, whether or not the child care program is faith-based, many just use that space. But churches are one of the main housing areas for child care programs. We also have a lot of community centers, community action councils, different nonprofits, and then another place that Head Starts and early Head Start slots are often found is in partnerships. It can be a child care program that is not completely a Head Start or an early Head Start, but they may have contracted with a Head Start, and the Head Start says, we'll pay you to put 10 slots here because we know we have families in this area that can benefit for that. So those partnerships are typically licensed child care that have just a few Head Start and early Head Start children within it. We do have child care programs in Kentucky that are for-profit businesses. They don't usually make much money, but you see a lot of chain child care programs like La Petite Academy, Kinder Care, Bright Horizons. Those are often for-profit organizations that are more national or regional chains. And then again, we do have some licensed public school preschool classrooms. So those are all the different locations that we think of child care being. And it's important to remember that they each are a really important part of the puzzle. What we need, those community centers, we need those churches that house child care programs. We also need our nonprofits and mom and pop centers that open up, because those are really staples of the community in a lot of our areas. In Kentucky, one of the things that our federal child care dollars asks us to provide is a quality rating system so that parents understand the quality of child care programs. In Kentucky, we have the Kentucky All-Star program. And if you look at the state of child care information, you can see the breakdown of centers. Our child care regs in Kentucky say that in order to receive state and federal funds, you'll be a part of the All-Star system. And that gives families an idea of what high quality is. We typically think of, on this 1 to 5 star system, kind of like a hotel rating system, 5-star system, we think of high quality as 3 to 5 stars. There are some programs that have opted out of the All-Star program, decided that they didn't want to participate in it because they do not utilize state and federal funds. And so they have a 0 rating if they've opted out. We have a very small number of only 70 programs that have opted out. The largest base of our centers is in that 1-star program, because you have to be at least 1 star to be able to participate in the child care assistance program, and in the past several years to receive those federal funds that came in since the funding is state and federal. But then you see that centers are trying to improve their quality, to move up the system, to get those higher accreditations. And we look at higher quality programs, a lot of times they have lower adult to child ratios, they have more appropriate developmental curriculum. They're screening the kiddos at their centers to make sure that if there are any delays, they're showing up early and parents can get more support. And a lot of times they care for the teachers better. We see in our higher accredited programs that they're giving staff benefits like health insurance where staff members want to stay longer, and that reduces staff turnover. So those are a breakdown of some of our quality controls in Kentucky when it comes to our child care programs. Another thing to think about is our Kentucky child care provider wages. So on your state of Kentucky sheet, we're using information from 2019, the UK Child Care Workforce Survey, but it has a breakdown of what, prior to the pandemic, we were paying teachers. Now, during the pandemic, Kentucky tried to motivate child care programs to pay their teachers a little bit more with the federal funds in order to try and attract more providers to the field. Right now, wages are so low that the retail industry and the hospitality industry are much more attractive than working in a child care program. It's hard work. You're changing diapers, you're wiping noses, and then you go home and you cut out gingerbread men to put on the bulletin board for the next day, and you write parent newsletters in your free time. You work with a lot of kids, and you work with parents, which honestly can be harder than working with young children at times. And so this is a high demand job, and some of our providers make a very small salary. Our child care program teachers, their average, the salary range in Kentucky is between $15,685 a year up to $31,000. With a median income of just over $22,000 a year, and that that salary is not appealing to draw people in from another field. Our family child care providers, who are a teacher and an administrator at the same time, their wages range from $5 an hour, $5.50 an hour, to $22 an hour. It's vastly different because these ladies, I say ladies because right now we don't have any male family child care providers in Kentucky, but these ladies typically only pay themselves once they've met the bills. And so that's why their wages can be as low as $5 an hour, because they may only have a small margin of money once they've paid all their bills, and that's what they take. And so they may work very hard, have a wonderful business, and then have very little salary that comes from it. And our directors, our managers, median income is just over $31,000 a year. Because of that, we have almost 19% of our directors have to have a second job after they work maybe 50 hours a week running a child care program. And almost 20% of our teachers have a second job as well. So those wages are important to keep in mind, because we do have to make sure we continue to attract people to the field. And wages right now are not the reason that people are entering this field. One of the greatest benefits that we have to support families in Kentucky that need child care is the Child Care Assistance Program. Now, I want to start off by saying this program is funded through the Child Care and Development Block Grant. You have a handout that specifically focuses on the Child Care and Development Block Grant. And these are the federal funds that Kentucky receives from Office of Child Care. And it is a block grant, but what I would like to stress is that there are very specific percentages of this block grant that have to be used for different things. Sometimes when you hear block grant, you think, oh, these are general funds. We can spend them however we want to. But these percentages are very specific, and the block grant is focused predominantly to help children who are in minority populations, whether that be poverty, living in homelessness, different at-risk situations. So 70% of the money that we receive in Kentucky from the Child Care and Development Block Grant must go to direct services for children through the Child Care Assistance Program and other funds of that nature. 12% of that money goes to quality. Actually, in Kentucky, we typically spend 15 to 16% on quality initiatives, but quality is a really loose word here. Quality means background checks to make sure that we don't have any convicted felons working in the classroom. It means the Office of the Inspector General going into centers and making sure that health and safety standards are in place so that children are not hurt or worse in child care programs. It also means professional development training for our teachers. It means technical assistance services that we offer throughout the state to make sure that our programs run as successfully as possible. 4% of those funds go to consumer education, and so that's where we really try and reach out to parents to tell them about the All-Star system, to tell them about what to look for in childcare, and to help them understand what a quality childcare environment looks like. And then there's a maximum of 5% of those funds that go to administrative fees. So that leaves 9% that's flexible. And honestly, in Kentucky, the flexible funds typically go to more child care assistance to help our most at-risk families. We have a lot of families in at-risk categories, like our children in foster care, where somebody might not be able to take a child into a foster home without child care assistance to help pay for their child care. And so there are a lot of families that benefit from the assistance program within Kentucky. There are also TANF funds available in Kentucky that go towards child care. Now, federally, up to 30% of your TANF funds can go to support child care in your state. Kentucky does not have enough TANF funds left over that up to 30% of them can go to child care, but we do typically have a small portion of the TANF funds that also help with the child care programs in Kentucky also. And then we have to provide a federal match every year to the Child Care Development Block Grant. And so Kentucky provides our match by $10 million in tobacco settlement funds and $10 million in general funds that are designated for the Child Care Assistance Program. So that $20 million is our match so that we can receive approximately $90 million from the federal government every year to support child care. With that $90 million that we receive every year, there is a huge amount of accountability that goes with it. The Office of Child Care and their regional offices come and do audits They do 3-year inspections. We send multiple reports throughout the year on how the funds are being spent, whether or not our state licensure requirements meet their requirements, what our state plan looks like. If you want a really good read, you can go to the Division of Child Care website, pull up the state plan. It's about 300 pages, and it's how the Division of Child Care for Kentucky is meeting all the federal requirements over the next 3 years. It is an extensive document, and it has to be updated regularly with any change.
Yeah, I'll read that tonight.
Exactly. It might help put you to sleep. But there's a lot of accountability at the federal level that goes along with that, and then the state also performs audits on that money. So in order to maintain those funds that we get from the federal government, we have to show that we are being good stewards of that money and that we're helping the families that need it, children living in poverty, children in foster care, children with disabilities, those experiencing homelessness, infant and toddler care, which is a high-risk group, and then even school-age child care, so that we don't have 6-year-olds getting off the bus and staying by themselves in the afternoon for multiple hours. Alone. So those funds go towards our child care assistance program. Do you have any questions, before I talk about child care assistance, do you have any questions about the Child Care and Development Block Grant and the funding that we receive? Okay. Child care assistance program. The family, in order to be awarded child care assistance, they have to be working a minimum of 20 hours a week. If the family isn't working, they don't need child care. Or they can be full-time students. So a student that is trying to go to school to get a degree can also receive child care assistance. Currently, families at 200% of the federal poverty level can qualify for child care assistance. That was increased from with ARPA funds. Prior to the pandemic, it was 160% of the federal poverty level. We also increased the reimbursement rate in Kentucky, which that means that it's based on the market rate. So what the centers in Kentucky charge is how we decide how much to reimburse. 80% of the child care programs in Kentucky are covered, the full cost is covered by CCAP. But that means 20% have overages. Now, prior to the ARPA funds, only 40% of the child care programs, the full cost was covered. A family could have a copay, so I say that 80% of the centers have the full tuition. If a family has a copay because their income is higher than others, then they may have a $25 a week copay or something. But the center's whole tuition is within the range that CCAP can pay for children who qualify for the full amount. And this is just the breakdown how I said we spend our money. We have the $20 million match. We have anywhere from 90 to 95 million. And it varies based on the appropriations of the federal government when they review the Child Care and Development Block Grant. Those funds have gone up, and the annual funds have gone up in the past couple of years as well as the one-time funds. And then TANF funding is used as well. One of the handouts that I gave you was on different programs that we offer in Kentucky to support our child care programs. The Division of Child Care, as the lead agency for those CCDBG block grant funds, are required to offer a lot of supports to child care programs. They do the National Background Check Program for child care providers, which includes looking at the Child Abuse and Neglect Registry, sex offender database, the state's individual background check, and so all that is processed through the Division of Child Care with funding. There are a lot of contract partners that help Division of Child Care, EKU, UK, different organizations, but they're required to have a registry of professional development. There are professional development trainings that DCC offers as well as UK. There are higher education scholarships that can be 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, or even just certifications. And the KEA office helps with that to distribute those. Division of Child Care offers child care credentials, trainer's credentials, the Commonwealth child care credential, and helps get the Child Development Associates, which is a national credential, offers scholarships for that. Licensing and monitoring of child care programs is required by the federal government, and the Office of the Inspector General assists with that. The All-Stars rating program is required. UK assists with that, as well as technical assistance. Kentucky has recently implemented the Family Child Care Network, a support agency for family child care providers throughout the state. Kentucky got a lot of national attention for this. We're one of the first states to pilot this and to support our family child care programs throughout the state. Most training and technical assistance is focused towards center-based care. Again, that's your bang for your buck because you can have 150 kids in one program. But those trainings and technical assistance do not help family child care homes because they're run so differently. You don't do the same type of training or the same type of setup when you have 5 children in your home versus 150 children in a center. And so we're really working in the state to expand the number of family child care homes and to support them, not only with training how to work with children, but also financial training, because these are entrepreneurs. We're trying to teach them how to do their taxes as a small business, how to be able to set a budget and have a strong business practice where the center won't collapse financially, as well as best practice. And then the Division of Child Care also runs the Child Care Advisory Council. This is one of 2 statewide advisory councils. The Child Care Advisory Council has DCC members, but it also has stakeholders, parents, and child care providers on it. And then they run the Child Care Assistance Program. Now, we also have great partners in Kentucky, like Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, that also offer supports to child care programs. Department of Public Health has child care health consultants that go to the centers and help them with technical assistance on medical and health-related issues. They might train child care providers on how to use an EpiPen or give them training on first aid and CPR. These ladies worked so hard the past 2.5 years. The child care programs were such a huge resource. And also the early childhood mental health specialists through the Department of Public Health were huge resources after all that our kids and our teachers have been through in the past couple of years. The Governor's Office of Early Childhood provides an amazing early childhood institute that offers a lot of professional development. They are piloting a nationally renowned apprenticeship program to get journeyman apprentice certificates, not only for adults, but for high school juniors and seniors that will be trained and graduate from the apprentice program, workforce ready. And then they also house the Early Childhood Advisory Council, which is state level administrators and partners that help make recommendations at the state level. So although our child care programs struggle as a small business, often they have a lot of great resources. We just have to find a way to create all the resources that they need. The last information that I have in my presentation today is kind of a breakdown of an independent child care program and what that looks like financially. We sent out the income and the expenses for a small child care program, and you can look here and see the center capacity and estimated program tuition. Child care is not cheap. For an infant, you're going to have basically at least $880 a month, sometimes $1,000 a month for care. And it always strikes me how overwhelming it is, because when you have an infant, you went from paying no child care at all to having to completely redo your budget to pay $1,000 a month to care for an infant. I had an infant and a toddler at the same time, and before I would just think, what did we do with this money before? We must have had such a lavish lifestyle, but all of a sudden you're paying all this to care for your children. Most people, it's more than college tuition would cost. It's more than your mortgage. We paid $400 more on child care a month than we did on our mortgage when our kids were little. And it can be overwhelming for families. Many people think at this point, do I stay in the workforce or do I pay child care and stay in the workforce? Those who do stay in the workforce, a lot of times they're staying in for health insurance for their family, but they're not making money. Or you have those that are so scared that if they left the job market when they came back 4 or 5 years later, that they would be obsolete. They would have to start all over at the bottom. As a mom who has worked in the field of early childhood and worked the whole time my kids were growing up, they started child care at 8 weeks, and I've been paying for child care for 11 years now, including after school care. I would not have been able to stay in the workforce without it. We lost child care for 3 weeks at one point during the pandemic when the child care program didn't have enough staff this past school year, and it was one of the toughest 3 weeks of my life because I was trying to work at home and do my meetings, and I had elementary school boys jumping off the couch in the background, and who's going to get hurt, and I was there with them, but I still couldn't get my job done. And so we have so many families who have so many needs, and often this falls on the mother. The mom has to decide, do I stay in the workforce or do I leave the workforce because the cost of child care is so high? And you think, okay, $220 a week, $880 a month is so big. But then that has to cover not just one person that you're paying to watch your children. It covers every person that interacts with your child. 3 or 4 teachers that work with the child during the day, administration, business managers, the person who is working in the kitchen. It has to cover the cost of the building, consumables, facility insurance. And so when you break all this down, most child care programs can barely afford to stay open. Now, the breakdown that I gave you for this particular center, based on this capacity and this tuition, they had $1,000 left over at the end of the month. They didn't pay health insurance or any type of insurance for their employees. The wages ranged from a minimum of $10 an hour to the director making $18 an hour. There was no maintenance in there for major expenses. If the roof needed to be replaced, if an industrial washer or dryer broke, if anything happened, the HVAC system went down, a major expense happened, then this program is automatically in debt. Most child care programs cannot afford to take out a small business loan because they don't have the monthly available income to pay the payments off. So one month of having a big expense can shut them down. Now, this also assumes, the budget that I gave you also assumes that they're at 90% enrollment and that people are paying their tuition. You always have families that have life happen. And so directors are trying to say, you have to pay me or you can't be here. But they also want consistent care for the children. And so payments can be late or missed. A small business is trying desperately to work with the families, but eventually have to turn people away sometimes if they can't pay the tuition. And so a lot of times full income does not come in, even though expenses are there. What we know is that it's hard to make this type of business operational. Monthly income, $121,824. Monthly salaries, the biggest expense that any child care program has, just over $77,000. Then additional monthly expenses from facility to food to feed children, insurance, $43,330. Remaining income, $1,054. So this assumes that CCAP got processed correctly. It's hard for centers to be on CCAP because you get paid at the end of the month. It's not something you can process every week. So if you do have children on the Child Care Assistance Program, you wait until the end of the month to get that check. Now, once you're used to waiting every month, it's not a hard issue, but that first month, when they've been there a whole month and you've had no income, that can be tough. Employees were given paid time off in this model, but they didn't have health insurance or any of those additional things. And then again, like I said, any major expense.
Dr. Vanover, I have a question.
Yes.
Is that the child care facility that you're talking about? Is that a rural or urban?
This particular one is located in Lexington in an urban area with a lot of children who are at risk financially.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. This center also operated at the maximum adult to child ratio. So again, like I said, 1 adult, 10 2-year-olds. That means that in a classroom where the maximum capacity is 22-year-olds, you have 2 adults, 22-year-olds. If you have one child in that room who's a biter and a teacher has to follow them around and prevent them from biting, then that other teacher has 19 2-year-olds they're responsible for watching. I have been that teacher in the classroom where I was 1 adult and 10 2-year-olds, and I can tell you now that none of you want to be that teacher with 10 2-year-olds. It is hard work. Kentucky has some of the highest ratios in the United States. Every single state that touches us has lower ratios. West Virginia, Missouri, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, we have higher ratios than anybody else. Food costs and gasoline. Right now we're looking at significant inflation across the U.S. And food costs and gasoline, when they inflate, it has a huge impact on being able to transport children, pick them up from after-school programs, feed them breakfast and lunch at facility. And again, this model also assumes that there is enough staff to keep all the classrooms open. If you do not have teachers for 2 to 3 rooms and you have to close them down, that's a significant swing in income. If it's a preschool classroom you have to shut down, that is a huge source of income because that's 20 children, as opposed to an infant classroom who could have a max of 10 babies. Even though the tuition is a little bit higher for infants, 1-year-old classrooms, infant classrooms lose money for centers because of the ratio of the adults to the children. You make your money back from that loss in preschool. So if a preschool classroom has to close, it's a huge financial impact. Here are the strengths that I want you to think about that Kentucky is doing well right now. The Family Child Care Network for recruitment and technical assistance of new family child care programs. This is huge, and we have a lot of other states that are jealous and looking at us and trying to model after this new program. The ECE TRIS database that EKU runs for the Division of Child Care, this is like a walking resume for every child care provider, and directors use it to look at the training of their staff and say, this is a weakness area. We need to find more training because all of my staff, are having a hard time in this area. It also shows the next time they need a background check, the next time they need pediatric abusive head trauma training, which is a state requirement. The ARP funds have helped to increase access to the Child Care Assistance Program dramatically, and so more families can have access to that assistance. Now, whether or not there are spots available in their county right now, that's a different story. Statewide training programs are in place right now through Division of Child Care, UK, the apprenticeship program that are really focusing on helping programs work with children with special needs, helping with program administration, and we're trying to focus on some of our weaker areas. And then the ARP funds have also allowed right now for a huge increase in scholarship participants. Any child care provider who is working a minimum of 20 hours a week in a child care program can qualify for scholarships to get certificates, associate's degrees, 4-year degrees in the field. And that is not a one-time thing. Once our teachers get that significant amount of training, that can have long-term benefits. But here are our greatest challenges. Child care wages cannot compete with hospitality and retail, and we have a significant staffing crisis. When you only make $10 an hour at child care, but Arby's is starting off at $16 an hour, for most families, it's not a choice where they're going to go and work. Centers with closed classroom are reducing the statewide capacity, and that means that families are on waiting lists, but their children are not actually in classrooms where they can get care. That's preventing some people from being able to work for their family. And it may increase the need for other support services like SNAP and TANF if the family members are not able to access work. We have a significant number of counties throughout the state that are child care deserts. Children with disabilities lack access to quality care for full-day care, and suspension and expulsion rates are much higher for children with disabilities just because the centers usually don't have the ability to care for them, not that they want to suspend them or expel them. Children of color also lack access to high-quality care, and parents struggle to find the funds to cover the cost of full-time child care. And so parents are leaving the workforce. And that does not just mean families with low income. Middle class families struggle to pay for child care, and there are no supports in place for them. I would be happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Yep. So I think your last two comments is probably at the crux of what we've got to solve. And that's one, child care being affordable throughout the entire state. Not just for those in poverty, but those middle class that it's like you said, you got 2 kids, that changes your life. And it in many cases, it does encourage folks to leave the workforce. And from an economic development perspective and recruiting business and industry to this state, we can't do that. We need all hands on deck as far as workforce. And then the other part of it is just the sustainability for these centers. And I can tell you from our perspective, and we have within our early childhood education center, probably about 120 kids at full capacity. Our building is paid for. So we don't overhead. We have all the other maintenance, routine maintenance, and all that. If not for the other programs, we would have had to close our doors years ago. It simply doesn't work. So we've got to create quality, affordable child care, and then we've got to grow centers throughout the state. How do you do that? The answer that a lot of states are coming up with, and I did some reading last night, and I think it's what all this is going to come to. The state's going to have to supplement at some level child care in the Commonwealth. In many states, they are through pay, and they have scales set up for if a teacher has a degree, you get this much, and it's like a quarterly or annual check that comes from the state to help supplement salaries. And that will help alleviate some of the issues with the centers being able to sustain, because that is one of the highest expenses. And I know at our center, I just pulled up our proposed base pay scale, which we actually had to go ahead and implement because our staff they're struggling so badly right now because of all the increased prices of everything. So a CDA, which is a Child Development Associates, that's a certificate, the basic level certificate that a early childhood educator gets.
About 2 college classes worth of training.
Okay. And so we're starting those folks out at $14 an hour now. At 3 years, $14.84. At 5 years, $15.73. And at 10 years, $16.85. That's the scale that we just went up to, and it's a huge jump from where we were. But like you said, this is a last-ditch effort to try to fill slots. We've got a classroom that we have not been able to reach the full capacity because we can't find enough teachers. So you're losing revenue there. You're not providing the service, but in order to try to fill those slots, you have to raise the pay to compete. And I think it's starting to work. I was very skeptical. I didn't think we could buy our way out of this problem, but we are starting to see slowly more applications come in, and we're slowly starting to fill those slots. So that's the reality each day of what we faced and we're probably the largest in our part of the state. Baptist Healthcare, their facility is probably close to ours, but that's what we're experiencing. Senator Schroeder, you have a question, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. I have a few questions, and first, actually, it's to you and Co-Chair Heverin. Maybe for clarification for myself, I know there's also a task force studying the, benefits cliff, I think is what we're referring to it as. Are they looking into the child care issue, or is that something that's in our territory, I guess?
Yeah, that would be within here. The main thing that we would deal with child care would be the Child Care Assistance Program, and that's kind of an entity into itself where it's percentage, and there is there is some play. And please explain this deeper. Where depending on what you make would be how much copay that a family might have to pay.
Yeah, so when you look at the range of federal poverty level, so you can anywhere up to 200% of the federal poverty level you could qualify, but the lower the income is for the family, then the more coverage you would receive. So a family that is just at maybe 195% of the federal poverty level would have a copay, but they would still receive funds that go directly to the child care center to pay for them. Now, during the past year, the Division of Child Care did implement a cliff effect clause into the Child Care Assistance Program. You have 12-month eligibility, and then at the end of 12 months, you have to come in and recertify with the program and show your income and those types of things. So at the 12-month mark, if you come in and you no longer qualify, there's a 3-month cliff effect cushion that allows you to have 50% of that coverage for 3 months as you transition to determining how you readjust your budget and get used to that. And I do believe that the Division of Child Care is looking at increasing that to 6 months within the week. I think they're going to be making new announcements.
Okay, great. Can I go ahead? Thank you. On it's my page 8. I'm not sure what it was for you, but it's your program tuition numbers. And I was wondering, is that's just an average across the state?
That is an actual child care program that's in Fayette County that serves
That's in Fayette. Okay, thank you.
A wide range, but they are reasonably priced in Fayette County.
Okay.
Infant rates, child care rates across the state have increased in the past 2 years. And I would say that some programs are charging $250 per week across the board. Others, their infant rate is around there, $250 to $275. The rates vary quite a bit. The most expensive program that I have seen, infant is always the most expensive. People typically scale down. There are a few programs that have a flat rate across the board, but generally your infant rates are most expensive, and it goes down to school age. Most expensive I've seen has been close to the $300 a week mark. But that was a reasonably priced program in Fayette County.
Okay, you said they vary quite a bit, and that's what I was curious between, Covington, Louisville, Fayette, and then the rural areas, how different they are. The other question I had going to, let's see, I think it was the basic level certificate that was mentioned. Is this like, are there? That's not just in Kentucky. That's a federal basic level certificate.
For the, like a credential for the child care
Credential,
provider?
yeah, yep.
There are Kentucky-based certificates, and then there are federal certificates.
Okay.
The Kentucky-based, the minimum credential you can get in Kentucky for a child care provider is called the Commonwealth Child Care Credential, and it is the first half of the content that is in the federal credential called the Child Development Associates. And that's equivalent to 2 college classes. The Kentucky intro is equivalent to about 1 college class. But then you can move up and get a director's credential in Kentucky is 4 to 5 college classes, and then there's an associate degree that is at all of our community colleges. We have a strong community college degree program for early childhood education for 2-year degrees, and then most of our larger state universities have a major in early childhood education as well.
So before we get to the degrees and I guess majors, when we're just talking about certificates, are there like is there reciprocity from other states' certificates, or is that's not really needed?
There is not. One of the things that the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NACCE, as we would call them, they're kind of the national professional development advocacy organization for young children. One of the things that they really are fighting for is more universal equivalency across the board, because each state varies so much on what their credentials are. Now, that one federal credential is the same everywhere. And then a 2-year and a 4-year degree are going to be pretty similar, but the individual state credentials vary, and pay rates vary so much. So if you have a federal credential in one state, your pay could be $5 an hour more in another. Whereas if you look at the medical field and take an education approach and look at the medical field, an RN certification is going to be very similar across states, no matter what you look at. The requirements are going to be the same. Your licensure is going to be the same. Early childhood certificates, even though you might have a teacher certificate in one state, the coursework that you could have can be very different across the board. We recently were looking at Tennessee because Tennessee just published a research study on the Tennessee preschool program and some significant flaws in their system. Tennessee's teacher certificate for early childhood is from preschool through 5th grade. How you teach a 5th grader is significantly different than how you teach a 4-year-old. 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders typically sit in a seat all day long and just listen like a lecture style. If you get trained to do that and then all of a sudden you're teaching 4-year-olds, not only is it going to be the shock of your life, but you're not really teaching them in a developmentally appropriate way. In Kentucky, our teacher certificate for early childhood ed in the public school system is from birth to 5. We're talking child development, movement, and play, and we have a great setup for a Kentucky teacher certificate. But the equivalency between states is all over the place.
So looking at the federal standard, is that more stringent, or is it more? Are they using different age levels, or I'm curious why not just Kentucky, but why aren't all the states just looking at the federal standard and then going from there to add to it rather than maybe not achieve it?
Well, this is the same in the public school system too. There's not one federal standard for a licensed public school teacher. When I got my teacher certificate in the state of Kentucky, we were required to have a master's degree within 10 years. I moved to Michigan when I was in high school. My mom was a teacher, and she had her master's because she had met that requirement. And everybody in Michigan thought she was crazy that she had a master's, and she must need to be a principal because nobody there had a master's degree. So it has a lot to do what the state expectation is. Like I said, if you're an RN, the expectation is going to be the same in almost every state. With education, it wildly varies. And unity among that throughout the states would be a huge improvement, and it could also bring a lot of pay parity. But right now we have a different model almost everywhere that you look.
Any other questions? Senator Thomas?
Thank you, Chairman Carroll. And I apologize for being late today. I was in court this morning and ran longer than I had anticipated. First of all, Ms. Vanover, it's nice meeting you.
Thank you.
I apologize for being late. I want to raise two questions. First of all, your discussion about early child care deserts. I'm trying to make some sense of your. Let me find it for a minute.
The map.
Yes. Obviously, it seems to me the best is 1 to 3 children per slot, then 3 to 6 children per slot, then 6 plus children per slot. What does that mean exactly in terms of why is 1 to 3 the best, then 3 to 6, then 6 plus per slot? What does that mean?
Okay, so you're looking at census data of how many children within that age range are within a county. If you have, to my census data that I have, we have a total of like 327,000 children from birth to 5 in Kentucky. Not all those children need child care. There are parents who stay at home, there's grandmas that watch children, things of that nature. So when you're looking for child care in an area, you're not going to need a slot for each child. We know that 61% of families with children under the age of 5 have all adults or all parents in that house that are working outside the home. So the child is going to have to be someplace during the day. We would love to be in that 1 to 3 range because typically when that happens, then all children who need child care have access to it. These degrees below are all considered deserts, but it also varies in how significant the desert is. Now, sometimes the desert, like 6 plus children per slot, doesn't show the uniqueness of the county. For example, when we were initially looking at where deserts were throughout the county, we're looking at a county out in Western Kentucky, and we're like, oh my goodness, there's very few slots. We went out to the county and looked. Well, there's a large Amish community there, and those families were not utilizing childcare, so people were not building childcare programs. Therefore, there weren't a lot of slots, but the county itself was not a desert because the demand was not there. These numbers are just showing, based on the census numbers of the children under 5 in that area, what access they would have to care.
Let me make sure I understand this. And I'm looking at Fayette County, which is in that 1 to 3 children per slot.
Yes.
So does that mean that for every child birth to 5 in Fayette County, that I guess if there's a slot of there's one child, if you have a child in that age group, there are 3 different places you could go?
No, it would be the reverse. For every 2 to 3 children, there's 1 slot.
Okay.
But Fayette County does not show on here as a child care desert. However, like I said earlier, there are neighborhoods in Fayette County that are. The neighborhood of Hamburg, which is a large business community, a lot of neighborhoods. There's almost no child care programs in that area. That area of Fayette County is a desert because the families that live there have to drive somewhere else to find child care. So there can be deserts within a community, even though the overall county has enough access to child care. Because we have to think that if I live in a large county like Jefferson County and there's care for me on the east end of Louisville, am I going to drive all the way to the west end of Louisville to work or to live and have my child on the other location? So you have to think about what's reasonable for the family as well.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that, Tim.
Not a problem.
My other question, and I've already made the point that this interim, I'm going to look at what Kentucky is doing right. You mentioned that we have some strengths, and you talk about there are 5 of them, the Family Child Care Network. Could you just spend a moment and in a sentence or two talk about what each one of these does, what each one of these strengths do?
Yes. So the Family Child Care Network has regional offices throughout Kentucky. And in these regions, there are staff members there that recruit new family child care home providers and that offer training and technical assistance to the family child care homes that are there. That includes business training so that the child care program can be financially sound. But it also includes coming into the home and helping them rearrange the home so that the care area is set up in a safe way and children are getting the most out of it. It's helping them understand child development principles and the best way to care for children, and how to interact with parents or children with special needs. So the Family Child Care Network is throughout the state. They have regional people that know the people in that area, and they feel comfortable knowing that that's a member of their community and that they're working with them to help, as well as recruiting new family child care homes, which is a huge need in Kentucky. The second point is a database that was created by EKU. It is a database that EKU has created from scratch based on the needs of Kentucky. And so it houses in it all the training records of every child care provider in the state of Kentucky. Every training that they've taken, background checks that they've taken, they can upload degrees, they can show the hours that they've had over time because it's longitudinal. Directors have access to this database for everybody who works on their staff. So they go through and they look at what their participants have had training on. It helps them track their mandatory hour of training requirements every year, but it also helps them see who hasn't had training in certain areas, where the staff is weak. It helps them create professional development plans for their staff so that they can continue to grow as they work in the field and make the best choices for the children that they have on hand. Our database in Kentucky, when Kentucky goes to national conferences and they talk about everything that has been created with this database, everybody is jealous. They have done an awesome job of creating this and maintaining it, and they're always looking for new ways. There's a lot of data in here that helps us see what child care providers need, how we need to shape new trainings, how skilled our child care providers are with what training they've already had, and it's a really rich source of data that we have access to. The Child Care Assistance Program has changed a lot in the past couple of years based on the amount of federal funding that Kentucky was given, but also based on information that families have told Kentucky that they need. So again, prior to the pandemic, Kentucky, you were able to qualify if you were at 160% of the federal poverty level, and then you could go to 40% of the centers and have your full coverage, like all the tuition paid, or you could go to the other 60% and have to pay an overage fee. But a lot of families can't pay a $75 per week overage fee because then, it adds up and you've got $300 extra at the end of the month. So those things are things that we looked at in Kentucky and said, we need more funding. The federal government encourages each state to have a goal of 75 to 80% of reimbursement so that 75 to 80% is covered by the subsidy program, and then families that want to go to that extra 20 to 25% can pay the overage and still consider those programs. We did open the gate at the beginning, so to speak, from 160% of the federal poverty level to 200%. And some of that has happened with federal funds, but also just families that we knew that were still struggling. Like Senator Carroll mentioned, middle-class families are still struggling to pay for child care. I know as a parent that I had a strong job when my children were little. My husband had a strong job. We had 2 incomes, and it still was a huge percent of what we brought home. And there are many families that struggle to be able to take that on and to still pay all their other bills during that time period. And middle-class families are definitely not excluded from that. So trying to continue to open that gate and provide for more families to enter the program is a huge need for Kentucky. The issue really is that there's this gap between how much the center can pay, like what we can pay the employees, so that ends up being the cost of care, versus what providers can pay. To pay for the quality you want, it really would be like $1,500 to $2,000 a month per child. But families can maybe pay, middle-class families can maybe pay $800 at most. Low-income families can't pay, more than a couple hundred maybe. And so we have this gap. And that's where the big issue comes in, where centers survive or not, is because how do you cover the gap between what makes a center operational versus high quality, what makes a high-quality employee, and what we have to pay them. And then we have done a lot of increased scholarships with the American Rescue Plan funds, having our teachers trained. Childcare is often an entry-level job because of the funding, but we still need skilled teachers. And so providing those scholarships and having our entry-level workforce get the skills that they need, particularly on child development. understanding that our youngest students cannot sit and listen to teachers talk all day long, that they need to play and explore in order to learn, that 2-year-olds are going to bite, and that we have to find strategies to help them not bite, but not to get mad at them and punish them too harshly for something that's normal at their age. Those kinds of things are key in training our teachers, and we need to provide those scholarships in order to do that. And then statewide training programs, both with the apprenticeship program offered through the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, training programs that DCC is offering. We're looking at those training areas that the database is telling us that our child care providers need, particularly training to work with children with special needs and program administration. What happens in most child care programs, and this happened to me because I was a director, you're a really great teacher, we think we're going to make you the boss. You can supervise all the other teachers and teach them how to teach. Okay, I know about teaching. I know nothing about marketing. I know nothing about setting budgets. I don't know how to process payroll. And so we get really great teachers that are promoted to be business managers, and nobody has ever taught them how to be business managers. I've got 3 degrees in education, but nobody ever sat down and told me what marketing and budget making. I mean, I was good at balancing my checkbook, so thank goodness I could, make sure that I took in more money than what I spent. But it's hard to run a business when you've never been trained to do so, and our directors need that skill set in order to make these businesses financially viable. Those are things that we're doing well.
Thank you, Ms. Vanover.
Okay. Thank you again. Something I would actually like to ask you all to do is to follow up, is just come up with some policy solutions. I love that you included strengths and weaknesses. A lot of times when people come to the General Assembly, it's just like the world is falling, here's the issue, good luck. And so I would like to hear from your all's perspective as advocates of what are actual policy solutions that we can do other than just put more money on it. I do realize that is something we're going to have to talk about. But I want us to continue to be able to think out of the box, too, with all of these. And I think this is for the entire task force as we're looking at upcoming speakers in the coming months is what are policy solutions, to provide policy solutions when you include data. And so we did not ask you for that. So just if, at some point, if you could follow up with that, I think that would be very good. And something I want to follow on what Senator Carroll had mentioned when we're looking, with state supplemental child care, I really want to be cautious in that too of, with the out of the box thinking and being able to say, what are some things that we can do to alleviate stress, or what can we do with things that we already have. And that was something I really tried to focus on with 499. And it's something I'm going to continue to beat the drum on is how can we get the private sector involved in this? Because they're the ones that need workers. And nonprofit need workers too, no doubt about that. But I think that this is a very generational conversation too, because we've come to now part of our lives where women are a big part of the workforce, and we need them to continue to be part of the workforce, because you'll hear me say the more voices we have at the table, the better conversations we have, because it's going to affect more people. And so as we're looking at this, how can we get these different sectors engaged? Because I think the conversation has got to start changing of, first off, one, no longer is it necessarily the type of day where it says, what can we do for you? It's what can we do for you? It's like as an employer, I think you've got to say, well, how can I get you to meet people where they are, rather than the employees meeting the employers, if that makes sense. But also, how can we start offering this as a benefit? This is just important as insurance and healthcare, and it's going to help their families. And so I just I'm passionate on that side of things, and I'm so excited. I look around the room, we all have different perspectives of where we come from. I don't have children, but I'm at the age of, I guess I could have children. Hopefully I get them someday. But I think that a lot of times when I was having this conversation on House Bill 499, a lot of our members just don't recognize the cost of child care, because maybe it's been 20 or 30 years since they've had kids in child care, or maybe they didn't have kids, or maybe their wives, or maybe they stayed at home with their kids. So we all have these different perspectives. But as I look around the task force, Senator Carroll's got such a great knowledge of what it's like to own a child care facility. Representative Bowling had to leave because today is his son's birthday, but he's a small business owner and has 2 young kids. Senator Schroeder has young kids, and Representative Raymond, she has young kids. She's in that. Representative Scott, his daughter has Down syndrome. And so I think he's going to be able to provide a really unique perspective on when we get down to, childcare with kids with different abilities. Reggie's just great to have here, Senator. I don't know enough personally about you, Senator. And then Senator Mike Wilson, I think that he's going to be but I think we've got all these different perspectives that's really going to make a difference. So I'm so excited to see what this task force is going to bring. And next month, I'm going to share what I've learned about Senator Thomas. That's my goal for the next month. But thank you for the incredible presentation. I think it's exactly what we wanted, of just the overview of what we can expect. And I really look forward to working with everybody to see what we can do to come up with policy solutions.
Excellent comments. And I think you're right. I think what was brought out in House Bill 4099, I think that is the way of the future. And I really do think that we're going to see more and more businesses as a way to recruit employees start making that a basic benefit. I don't think there's any question about that, and I do agree that is part of the solution. As we move forward, and one question I want to ask before we wrap up, Dr. Vanover, is looking at the regulations. Can you talk a little bit about with a new center opening up, and let's not one that's really going to be high quality to begin with. I mean, it's just somebody decided to open up a center. They may have 10, 15 kids. What does the regulatory environment look like for them? What hoops do they have to jump through to open up? And let's maybe 5 minutes on this, please.
So we have a lot of people that often will say, I like kids, I'll open a child care program. That should be easy. And they think about the part of interacting with the children and not necessarily the regulations and the business aspects. So in Kentucky, you have to apply to open a child care program through the Office of the Inspector General, the Division of Regulated Child Care. When you reach out to them, there's an application process that you have to go through, and but they also refer those candidates to UK, who has a training called Getting Started in Child Care. And that training, for somebody who has no background in child care, it goes through so many details of, how is the fire marshal involved? What are food requirements? How much space do you have to have in the facility per child, the square footage? Lots of really detailed things that people may not initially understand. Once you've completed that training, a lot of people complete that training and then think, maybe this is not the business venture that I would like to go into. But once they've completed that training, there's technical assistance that's available to support you. The coaches through UK that do technical assistance throughout the state can be contacted, health and safety specialists that can kind of help coach through that process. Division of Regulated Child Care does a couple of rounds of inspections. You have to be finally approved before you can open your doors, but that's for a temporary license. And so during the process of your temporary license, you have to be able to show that you can follow those minimum requirements and keep those health and safety standards in place before you get a permanent license. So there's different levels that go along with that. In Kentucky, there's also specific trainings that teachers have to have. Like there's a federal requirement for a pre-service training that you have to have. In Kentucky, you have to have it within the first 90 days. And it goes through health and safety, how to reduce illness, how to prevent injuries, mandated reporting on child abuse, and then basic supervision, like, okay, I can't stand in the middle of the room with my back to half the classroom and make sure the kids are safe. Where do I put my body so that I know all the kids are safe at one time? And so several people have to have that. We talk about somebody always has to be on staff with first aid and CPR. And so a lot of that goes into effect in applying for your initial license or certification before you open up. But there are trainings available, technical assistance to help, and then the final approval process that goes along with that.
Is there any data available for centers as far as how many offer benefits, what benefits are offered to staff? Because that is a huge part of the equation on cost as we move forward, and I think that's probably a critical element.
Yeah. The UK workforce survey is done, so there's a certain amount of research that it has to be done in order to be compliant with the federal law for Child Care and Development Block Grant. There is a market rate survey conducted every 3 years that looks at how much centers cost and what type of centers cost what, things like that. UK also conducts a workforce study every 2 years. And the workforce study looks at what people are paid, are they offered benefits, things of that nature. Now, with survey data, you're not looking at every single provider in the state. They typically get around 400 participants in the survey, so the most current data. They published one this past year at the beginning of 2022 that was specific to the pandemic. And so it looked at some things that they don't normally look at in most workforce studies to get an idea of how the pandemic affected things. The last typical workforce study that they did was in 2019, and that looked more at, the norms. How many, do you offer health insurance? Do you offer additional benefits? Do you offer paid time off? What's your salary range? Those types of things. That research is published on the here in Kentucky, looks like.
Okay. Does everyone feel like they've got a good basic understanding of the system and the different components on delivery types within the state? Okay, that was the main goal of today's meeting. It's hard to get to next steps. I would recommend, if you have some, I know that all of you have all kinds of free time, do some reading as we go through this process. I spent an hour or so last night just looking up how states are handling this issue and some of the various solutions that they're coming up with to help supplement child care. The models like House Bill 499, communities are stepping up. If I'm a judge executive and I'm trying to recruit a major industry to my county, today's time, you can bet that there's going to be some type of child care component to my offer to get that business to my community. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think Owensboro has something in the works where they haven't actually taken any steps yet, but they are pulling all this together as a community. And we'll probably have them in one day to kind of get updated on where they're headed. But I think you're going to see more of this as time goes by, with communities stepping up and really trying to be a part of this. And it's a difficult business to be in at so many different levels, and it is critical to the success of this state, all facets of our state. So we have got to come up with solutions, outside the box solutions, and just some basic fundamental to make sure that these providers can provide for their families, can make a living. I can tell you from a provider in my area who probably has and I always say this, and I shouldn't because I guess we're kind of a competitor, but iKids in Marshall County, Jennifer Washburn, she is a NACI accredited. So you've got Kentucky All-Stars, and then you've got NACI. NACI's like the top level, so her ratios are even lower. If she had to depend on her center to feed her family, it just wouldn't happen. And that's that's that you try to run the very best quality that you can give your families, and you can't do it and survive. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're looking at. That's the big challenge that we have. And if you all can read up as much as you can to kind of bring some of the ideas that you're reading from other states into these meetings, and we'll probably try to get representatives from a couple other states that we recognize as being successful, get them in to kind of talk about what they're doing and what works and what doesn't work. And, we have to be fiscally responsible in solving this problem, and I think everyone agrees with that. And there are many different angles we can approach this at. But the better we educate ourselves through this process, the better we're going to be able to come up with policy at the end of this interim to move forward in January. Before we adjourn, any of you folks in the audience, stakeholders, do you all have any questions or any comments that you want to make on anything that you've heard? And again, from this point forward, I want this to be interactive with all of us. Senator Thomas, do you have, wait, yeah, hold on. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy.
Come on, yeah, come up to the front, please. And push the button to turn it on, please.
Hi, I'm Amy Neal, and I'm with the Kentucky Governor's Office of Early Childhood. And I would say thank you also for convening this task force. I would just remind folks about the KY stats and the early childhood profile. We have some incredible early childhood data, and we just recently, just actually last week, released a refreshed early childhood profile. And we have some really incredible data from birth to 5. And so I think it's really important that we look at that data. You know, we know what works in Kentucky. We know what high quality programming is, what it looks and sounds like. And so, you know, Dr. Vanover talked about, you know, blending and braiding funding sources and how important that is. And so I would just really encourage us to maybe invite some staff from KY Stats in, Kentucky Center for Statistics. And so that's what I would say. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do want to make it clear as we go through this process that this needs to very much be a cooperative effort with the executive and the legislative branch, and a bipartisan effort. This will benefit all of us if we can solve these problems and get the right trajectory for child care, early childhood education in the state. Senator Thomas, I'm going to give you the last word, sir, because I respect you so much.
Well, Senator Kerr, that respect is mutual, but I'm going to let you have the last word. I have nothing else to say.
Yeah, somebody write that down. That won't happen again. Okay, we're looking at the next meeting. The task force will be on July the 26th at 1 p.m. And I want to apologize to you all because in all likelihood, every one of these meetings is going to be 2 hours. And I can't guarantee you in November that we're going to be done with this. And I've talked to our leadership, and if we have to carry it over, then, you know, we just want to make sure we have the very best products when we get done, and that we have thoroughly thought through these issues. And Kentucky's setting the standard. We're not going to follow, we're going to lead in this. And we have the expertise within this Commonwealth with Dr. Vanover's help, with Amy's help. We can make it happen, and we can do it and be fiscally responsible. We can do quality. We can take care of these child care deserts that David Givens always talks about, and we've got to make sure that that is a strong component, and look outside the box for those areas, and what other types of organizations can we bring on board to provide these services that are maybe more common in rural areas. So layer after layer of this issue, and we're going to peel back all of them. If there are no other questions, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.